Cleopatra is one of the most powerful women ever to come out of the ancient Mediterranean world. She ruled Egypt for 21 years, from 51 to 30 BC.
The desert air over Taposiris Magna trembled with heat as the team gathered around the newest subsurface scans. For years, the site had promised greatness, but now something entirely different pulsed beneath the earth, a geometric shape unlike anything previously detected in Egypt. The lead archaeologists hesitated, sensing this discovery was not merely historical but something that defied expectation. The entrance to the hidden passage was uncovered only after a portion of the temple floor collapsed during routine restoration. Beneath the rubble, the researchers found a narrow slope, carved with astonishing precision, descending into the darkness at an angle too perfect to be accidental. Dust sifted in the stale air as they lowered their lights and prepared to explore. The first chamber beneath Taposiris Magna was silent, except for the occasional crackle from equipment. Smooth walls, unlike any known Ptolemaic masonry, reflected their light with a faint shimmer. This was the first clue that the place they had stumbled into was not a burial annex, but something far more deliberate and concealed. As they advanced, the walls displayed faint etchings of Cleopatra, but not in the style typically commissioned during her reign. Her likeness was distorted into a more archaic form, surrounded by constellations and symbols that predated her kingdom by millennia. The team exchanged nervous glances. The anachronisms were impossible to ignore. The floor sloped deeper until they reached a section collapsed long ago. It appeared natural, perhaps caused by an ancient earthquake, but the blockage hid something just beyond. After hours of clearing the rubble, they exposed a smooth doorway sealed by a polished slab, decorated with serpent motifs, coiling into an eye like none seen in Egyptian iconography. The slab responded strangely to their tools. When touched with metal, it vibrated faintly. When brushed with the scientists' bare hands, it grew warmer. It took nearly an hour before they discovered a pressure point that triggered an internal mechanism, causing the slab to slide aside on silent tracks that looked impossibly intact. Behind it, the second chamber breathed out a gust of cool, preserved air. Their lights flickered as they entered, illuminating long strips of wall engraved with scenes of Cleopatra standing before what appeared to be a massive circular device. In these images, she wore a crown with unfamiliar tendrils extending outward like rays. At the center of the room was a cube-shaped stone block covered with markings from multiple eras of Egyptian writing. The sides shimmered slightly, as if coated with a thin residue. One researcher suggested it resembled meteoric iron dust fused with limestone, a combination never found in Egyptian artifacts. As they circled the cube, cameras recorded minor electromagnetic disturbances. The device inside the chamber seemed to generate its own intermittent pulses. The team began to suspect the place had been sealed, not simply to protect a tomb, but to isolate something dangerous or sacred. In one corner, they found a panel that could be pushed aside. Behind it lay a steep shaft, descending into darkness. The sides were unnervingly smooth, as though carved using tools far more advanced than anything available in Cleopatra's time. Excitement and dread mingled within the group as they prepared to descend. Ropes were set, harnesses secured, and one by one the researchers rappelled down the shaft. The walls felt strangely warm, emitting a faint hum. As they reached the bottom, dust billowed around their boots, revealing a chamber even larger than the previous one, perfectly circular and architecturally impossible for the era. At the center of this chamber stood a massive sarcophagus-shaped capsule, unlike any known Egyptian burial container. It was constructed from a deep black stone that absorbed their light instead of reflecting it. On its surface were symbols combining hieroglyphs, star maps, and shapes not found in any catalog. The capsule appeared locked by an intricate mechanism involving 3 interlocking rings. When their lights passed over the rings, tiny prisms inside them refracted the beams, creating complex patterns on the ceiling. The researchers realized Cleopatra had hidden something of extraordinary importance within this capsule. As they approached it, one researcher gasped. Along the perimeter of the chamber were frescoes showing Cleopatra performing a ritual with an unidentified figure. The entity was humanoid, yet elongated, adorned in a shroud patterned with constellations. Its face was obscured, leaving only gleaming oval shapes where eyes might be. One panel depicted the figure offering Cleopatra a small, glowing object. Another showed Cleopatra instructing her scribes to seal something away beneath the temple. The chronological impossibility of these scenes threatened the foundations of Egyptian scholarship. A low hum rose through the chamber, vibrating their shoes. Several devices malfunctioned simultaneously, their screens turning to static. The hum seemed to originate from the capsule itself, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. When the air grew colder, they realized the capsule had activated in response to their presence. They debated retreating to bring in more specialized teams, but the lead archaeologist insisted they continue. Cleopatra's lost tomb had been sought for centuries. If this was even a fraction of that legacy, they could not turn back now. Analyzing the inscriptions around the capsule, they discovered references to a threshold night, a term never found in known Cleopatra-era writings. It was described as a convergence of heavens and earth, a moment of great transformation. Cleopatra, according to the text, had been preparing for this event. The mechanism sealing the capsule responded not to force, but to sound. A resonance test revealed the rings vibrated at precise frequencies. Singing bowls brought for delicate calibration were used. When one bowl hit the perfect tone, the first ring shifted audibly. The chamber reacted immediately. Light rippled across the walls in waves, illuminating symbols that had been invisible moments before. These hidden inscriptions formed a pattern that looked eerily similar to a star map, but the stars indicated in the pattern matched no current celestial positions. The second ring opened with a deeper hum, sending dust spiraling upward. The frescoes briefly glowed as if painted with bioluminescent minerals. Their lights dimmed spontaneously, leaving only the pulse from the capsule to guide them. As the final ring moved, a sinking realization swept through the group. This was not a tomb in the traditional sense. It was a containment structure designed by Cleopatra with knowledge someone or something had given her. The capsule lid slid aside with silent grace, exposing its contents. Inside lay a smaller sealed vessel wrapped in layers of linen still intact after 2,000 years. But the linen was not the strangest part. It glowed faintly, as though coated in phosphorescent particles. The vessel was shaped like a stylized heart, carved from an unknown metallic mineral. It bore markings resembling both Egyptian and pre-dynastic symbols, arranged in a pattern that hinted at mathematical precision never associated with Cleopatra's artisans. As they lifted the vessel, the temperature plunged. The air crackled with energy, and one researcher screamed as her hair stood on end. Something inside the vessel shifted, tapping softly against the inner wall like a small stone striking metal. The archaeologists placed it carefully on a flat stone altar built into the chamber. Surrounding the altar were grooves filled with a crystalline residue. As their lights passed over it, the crystals vibrated, chiming faintly like thin glass. When they unwrapped more of the linen, they found the vessel had a seam. A pressure-sensitive latch, almost invisible, lined the upper edge. Against every instinct urging caution, they pressed it. The vessel opened. Inside lay an organic object, suspended in a translucent gel. It resembled a heart, but not a human one. It had additional tendrils curling from its base and a faint rhythmic pulse, impossibly still active after 2 millennia. It reacted to the fresh air by twitching once. Shock rippled across the team. Cleopatra had hidden something alive, or something that refused to die. The chamber itself responded. The frescoes lit up entirely, as though illuminated by internal fire. Figures danced across the walls, showing Cleopatra communing with the entity. The glowing heart-like object appeared in her hands as she stood before a celestial event. The inscriptions beneath the scenes began shifting, as though rearranging their order. The archaeologists recorded everything, though they could hardly breathe from the intensity of the atmosphere around them. One researcher placed a scanner near the object. The readings were incomprehensible. Frequencies outside biological norms, elemental signatures unlike any known compound, radiation spikes that rose and vanished instantly. The object seemed to resist being measured. As they leaned closer, the object emitted a soft pulse. The lights flickered. Dust rose in swirling patterns around their feet. Another pulse followed, stronger, resonating through the entire chamber. A hidden panel in the far wall slid open. Beyond it lay a final corridor decorated with hieroglyphs mixed with unknown symbols. These writings warned of a celestial visitor, a returning eye, and the necessity of sealing away the heart that remembers. It was clear Cleopatra believed this object was linked to something ancient and dangerous. The corridor ended in a small alcove where a single stone tablet rested. The tablet bore a message written in a cipher unlike anything recovered from antiquity. The symbols rearranged depending on the angle of light. The translation took minutes that felt like hours. As the symbols shifted, their meaning gradually took shape. The tablet warned of a future alignment when a celestial body would pass close to Earth, awakening the buried memory. Cleopatra had feared this moment enough to hide the object here. While the team studied the tablet, the object in the vessel pulsed again, this time with a force that knocked one researcher backward. The gel around it evaporated instantly, filling the chamber with a faint mist. The object twitched once more, then unfurled its tendrils. Panic spread as equipment malfunctioned. The walls vibrated, the frescoes shimmered, and the floor emitted a low growl like distant thunder. Something in the chamber had been triggered, something Cleopatra had desperately hoped no one would ever awaken. A brilliant flash erupted from the vessel, and for a moment the symbols on the walls aligned perfectly, forming a map. The map pointed to a region in the sky where no recorded stars existed during Cleopatra's time. The team realized the truth. Cleopatra had not been guarding a tomb. She had been safeguarding a warning about a force linked to the origins of Egyptian cosmology, and perhaps even older. The object began emitting rhythmic pulses identical to the hum that had filled the first chamber. The pulses grew stronger, resonating with the structure of the chamber itself. Dust fell from the ceiling in fine sheets. As the pulses intensified, the inscriptions on the tablet, glowing brighter, revealed a final message. It stated the heart-like object was not of this world. It came from the travelers of the night sky, beings Cleopatra believed would one day return. The archaeologists scrambled to escape, realizing they had unleashed something dormant. The chamber behind them roared with energy as they climbed back to the upper levels. The cube in the first chamber glowed violently, sending beams of light into the ceiling. The serpent-etched slab trembled, threatening to seal itself again. The team dashed through the narrow passage just as the slab slid shut behind them. Once outside, they collapsed onto the temple floor, gasping for air. The ground beneath them shook, and a faint hum resonated through the sand, echoing the pulse of the object below. For a moment, the desert fell silent. Then a low, distant rumble rose beneath the temple, as though answering a call from the sky. The archaeologists stared into the horizon, unable to comprehend what they had awoken. The truth was undeniable. Cleopatra's lost tomb was not a resting place, but a final barrier. Everything she hid beneath Taposiris Magna had been meant to remain sealed forever, and now it wasn't. The trembling beneath the sands did not stop. It deepened, spreading like a pulse through the desert floor until even the distant dunes seemed to quiver. The team crawled backward from the trembling stones, instinct forcing them away even as their minds struggled to comprehend what was happening beneath their feet. A gust of wind swept over the ruins, unnaturally cold for the desert. The sky above Taposiris Magna dimmed, as if a cloud had passed before the sun. Yet there were no clouds. The archaeologists exchanged looks of dread, realizing the phenomenon mirrored the fresco Cleopatra had left as a warning. The pulse came again, but this time it was not just a vibration. A tone, low and metallic, resonated through the stones of the temple. It was the same frequency they had triggered when unlocking the capsule, except now it was louder, intentional, rising. Dust swirled in spirals across the floor as though drawn toward a point beneath the temple. The archaeologists watched, horrified, as their gear, metal tools, recording devices, even stray coins, rolled toward the sealed slab they had escaped through moments earlier. The slab itself began to glow faintly from within. Thin beams of pale blue light seeped through the tiny cracks around its edges, crawling across the floor like searching fingers. It felt as though the chamber below was breathing, inhaling energy from the world above. One archaeologist stumbled backward, realizing the hum now resonated inside their chest cavity. Their heartbeat felt synchronized to it, matching its rhythm, an impossible sensation that left them gasping and disoriented. The lead archaeologist steadied herself, gripping the edge of a broken column. Her voice trembled as she declared that they had to document everything before the authorities arrived. But even as she spoke, the realization struck them all. No outside team would believe this. No artifact, no scan, no written report could capture the impossible. The temple stones responded again, this time with a concussive thud strong enough to send sand pouring from the ceiling. A hairline crack splintered across the floor, snaking outward from the sealed slab like a living thing. Beneath that crack, a faint reddish glow flickered. The archaeologists froze. None dared approach. Every instinct warned them the chamber below was no longer dormant. Whatever Cleopatra had entombed had awakened, its purpose now unfolding after centuries of enforced silence. The glow brightened, pulsing in steady intervals. It was unmistakably synchronized with the beating rhythm of the object, the heart that had never fully died. The youngest member of the team whispered that they had to flee. The others nodded, scrambling for their packs, preparing to abandon decades of work, equipment, notes, everything. Survival was now the only priority. But as they turned, the wind shifted. A sudden deafening silence fell over the desert. Even the gusts of sand froze mid-air for a fraction of a moment, suspended like dust caught in amber. Then the sound arrived, a deep, resonant tone that came not from beneath the ground, but from above. The team looked to the sky. A thin, perfectly straight beam of white light had appeared in the atmosphere, descending slowly, almost lazily, like a thread being lowered from an unseen hand. It stopped directly above the ruins of Taposiris Magna, illuminating the temple in an otherworldly glow. The archaeologists stared upward, their breaths caught in their throats. The light was not sunlight. It had no warmth. It felt sterile and terrifyingly precise, as though measuring or scanning the ground below. The pulse beneath the temple intensified in response. The beam above flickered, expanding slightly, and within its core, a shadow appeared. Something was descending within the light, something elongated, shifting, almost liquid in shape. The air around the temple buzzed as if struck by invisible static. Terror rooted the archaeologists in place. The crack in the floor split wider, releasing a sound like stone screaming. The glowing blue tendrils of light that had escaped earlier now surged upward, reacting violently to the descending beam. For the briefest moment, the ancient temple was illuminated by two impossible forces, one rising from the earth, the other falling from the sky. The frescoes had shown this moment. Cleopatra standing before the glowing heart, the sky darkened, the beam descending, the entity beside her pointing to a constellation that did not yet exist in the heavens. The team realized now that the sealed object had served as a beacon, and in opening it, they had reignited a signal Cleopatra had buried to protect the future. The luminescent heart below released another pulse. This one was so powerful, it knocked the team off their feet. The beam in the sky wavered, then restabilized, narrowing into a finer, sharper line. The shadow within the beam clarified. It resembled the figure from the fresco, the elongated silhouette, the shroud of constellation-patterned symbols, the gleaming oval shapes where eyes should be. The archaeologists gasped, recognizing the impossible. The being Cleopatra had depicted was not myth. It was real, and it was returning. The hum from below became a roar. The sealed slab trembled violently, then split open, releasing a burst of pale blue flame that spiraled upward toward the descending figure. The two energies collided, creating a blinding sphere of light that enveloped the temple. The archaeologists shielded their faces, unable to comprehend the scale of what they had triggered. The light grew brighter, consuming the dunes, the sky, even their own shadows. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light collapsed inward, shrinking until it was no larger than a spark. The desert fell deathly silent, When the archaeologists dared to look again, the slab had sealed itself. The beam in the sky had vanished. The glow beneath the floor was extinguished. But something had changed. The sand across the entire site had melted into a smooth, glassy surface. The temperature had dropped drastically, and etched into the glass was a new symbol, one Cleopatra had never recorded, one the archaeologists had never seen. A single elongated eye with a pupil shaped like a star. It pulsed once, and then it waited. The team huddled together, every nerve screaming that they had just witnessed something beyond human understanding. No one moved. Even the wind had ceased, leaving an unnatural stillness that pressed down on their chests. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if awaiting the next move of whatever had just returned. One of the researchers dared to approach the glassy sand. Her fingers traced the surface cautiously, expecting it to be cool and solid. But instead, the sand beneath her touch pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. She recoiled, eyes wide. The pulse synchronized perfectly with the memory of the heart-like object in the chamber below. What is it?" someone whispered, voice trembling. No one had an answer. The symbol, the eye with the star-shaped pupil, remained, faintly glowing, almost alive. It was not just a mark, but a warning, or perhaps a lock. The team realized that Cleopatra had not simply hidden a relic. She had embedded a living message in the very fabric of the earth. Suddenly, the ground shivered beneath them again, but this time it was not a tremor. The pulse underfoot propagated through the glassy sand, carrying vibrations they could feel in their bones. It was as though the tomb, the object, and the sky itself were all part of a single, synchronized system, now fully awakened. A soft hum began from the horizon, faint at first, then growing louder, resonating with the pulse beneath them. The archaeologists looked up, and a faint shimmer appeared across the desert air, like heat waves, but moving against the wind, forming shapes, symbols, patterns, constellations. They were in motion, rearranging themselves in mid-air. The youngest member of the team, trembling uncontrollably, whispered, "It's like the sky itself is alive, and it's responding." Another pulse from the ground made them all stumble. Then, a gust of wind, icy and sharp, swept over the temple. The glassy sand rippled like water, and the symbol in the center began to glow brighter, extending rays outward, connecting to points in the desert that had previously seemed ordinary. Small mounds, scattered rocks, they were now nodes in some ancient network, linked by an energy they could not see but could feel. The air shimmered again. From the horizon, faint shapes began to emerge, elongated, shimmering forms, moving like shadows, but impossible to trace. Each shape seemed tethered to the pulse from below, almost as if the heart-like object had called them forth. The team realized with horror that these were not animals, not humans, not anything recorded in history. They were entities. One of the researchers clutched the lead archaeologist's arm. "We need to leave," she stammered. "Now! Whatever Cleopatra hid, it's not done." But before they could move, a beam of light shot from the star-shaped eye in the sand, piercing the sky. The entities reacted immediately, stopping mid-motion, as though commanded by the beam. Then, a collective sound, a tone beyond words, filled the air. The pulse beneath the temple synchronized with it perfectly, vibrating through every particle around them. It was a communication, and the archaeologists understood. They had triggered a sequence Cleopatra had intended for a future civilization to witness, or perhaps to prevent. The entities, the pulse, the symbols, it was all a warning and a test. The lead archaeologist turned to her team, voice barely audible over the humming resonance. "We were never meant to take this lightly. Cleopatra didn't just hide something precious. She hid a legacy that could reshape everything we know about history, and perhaps about ourselves." The pulse slowed slightly, but the eye in the sand continued to glow, a quiet reminder that whatever had been awakened was only dormant, not gone. The desert remained eerily still, yet charged with energy. They knew that returning authorities or scientists could never fully comprehend the events, and that the warning would be ignored until it was too late. The team gathered their equipment, shaken but determined. Every step away from the temple felt heavier than the last. The sand beneath them pulsed faintly with each movement, a reminder that the tomb, the object, and the celestial alignment were all connected, and that their awakening had consequences far beyond the sands of Egypt. Looking back one last time, they saw the eye in the sand, glowing steadily. It was not merely a symbol, it was alive, aware, and watching. The pulse had become part of the desert itself, a heartbeat marking the arrival of something ancient and powerful. As they disappeared into the night, the wind rose once more, carrying with it whispers that seemed almost human, almost intelligible. The desert had absorbed the pulse, and the message Cleopatra had hidden beneath Taposiris Magna was no longer silent. And somewhere, far above, a star aligned perfectly, glimmering like the pupil of an eye, waiting for the next chapter to unfold.